Johnny Depp's journey is one of the most remarkable, emotional, and deeply inspiring stories of resilience, a tale that begins with pain, struggle, and uncertainty yet transforms into one of triumph, creativity, and extraordinary perseverance. Because when he was just a young man, life seemed to have stacked every possible challenge against him, forcing him into battles with poverty, rejection, and even his own inner darkness. But what makes his story so powerful is not the fame or the success he eventually achieved, but rather the way he refused to let despair dictate the rest of his life, how he chose to rise every time he was knocked down, how he pushed through when depression tried to silence his dreams, and how he found light even in the darkest corners of his existence. For Johnny Depp was never handed anything on a silver platter. Instead, he grew up in a turbulent household, moved from place to place, and experienced the kind of instability that can shatter a child's confidence. Yet even then he clung to a spark, a faint but undeniable desire to express himself, whether it was through music, art, or performance, because deep inside he believed there had to be something more than pain, something more than the limitations that surrounded him. And when he first picked up a guitar, when he first felt the freedom of creating something that was entirely his own, a seed was planted, a seed that would later grow into one of the most unique careers Hollywood has ever seen. But it wasn't easy, because before the applause, before the red carpets, before the blockbusters, there was rejection after rejection, door after door slammed shut, and the constant whispers of doubt telling him he wasn't good enough, that he didn't belong, that maybe he should give up and find something safer, something ordinary. But Johnny Depp refused to let go of his dream, even when depression crept into his life like an uninvited shadow, pulling him into moments of despair. Where the weight of everything felt unbearable, he still fought back, and that fight, that refusal to surrender, is what turned his life around. Because the truth is, every great story has moments of collapse, every great journey has nights of doubt, and every great success is born from a heart that decides to keep beating when everything else says stop. And Johnny's life is living proof of this, for he endured financial struggles, career uncertainties, and personal battles that could have broken anyone. Yet he used those very struggles as fuel, turning them into art, pouring them into characters that would later become legendary. Whether it was Edward Scissorhands, Captain Jack Sparrow, or countless others, each role was not just acting, it was his soul speaking to the world, his pain being transformed into performance, his heartbreak becoming healing for others. And in doing so he taught millions of people that depression does not define you, failure does not end you, and darkness cannot hold you forever if you refuse to stop walking toward the light. Because Johnny Depp's journey is not just about Hollywood fame, it is about the strength of the human spirit, the ability to transform wounds into wisdom, to turn trials into triumphs, and to prove that no matter how impossible life feels, you can always write a different ending, one where you win, one where you rise, one where you find yourself standing taller than you ever imagined. And that is why his story is so powerful, because it shows that the very struggles that try to break you are often the same struggles that build you, that depression which once threatened to silence him is the very shadow that gave contrast to his light, that rejection which once left him doubting himself is the very push that made him fight harder, and that pain which once haunted him is now the reason he connects so deeply with millions of people across the globe. For Johnny Depp is not just an actor, he is a reminder that you can fall 1,000 times and still rise again. You can walk through storms and still find sunshine. You can face your worst fears and still carve out a life that inspires others. And if he could rise from the depths of depression to become one of the most beloved figures in the world, then so can you, because his story is not just his own. It belongs to everyone who has ever felt broken, everyone who has ever questioned their worth, everyone who has ever thought of giving up. It is a call to keep going, to keep fighting, to never surrender, and to trust that one day your pain will become your strength. Your struggle will become your power, and your story will inspire someone else to do the same. Johnny Depp's story does not end with the first glimpse of success, because as soon as the lights of Hollywood began to shine on him, new battles appeared, new storms arrived, and once again he found himself face to face with depression, personal struggles, and the heavy burden of fame. Yet even here he refused to give up, showing that resilience is not something you need just once, but something you must carry with you through every chapter of life. And while many thought his journey had peaked after his early roles, what truly defined him was his ability to keep pushing forward despite setbacks. Because the truth is, success never comes in a straight line. It is a crooked road filled with highs and lows, victories and defeats, and Johnny learned to walk that road with courage, turning every scar into a lesson, every failure into a stepping stone, and every heartbreak into deeper artistry. For depression would whisper again, trying to convince him that the pain was stronger than his spirit. But each time he answered with action, he chose to keep working, keep creating, keep fighting. And this is where his story becomes even more inspiring, because he did not simply rely on one role, one success, or one moment of applause. He reinvented himself again and again, bringing to life characters that no one else could play, characters who carried his own emotions, his own depth, his own struggles. And in that process, he gave the world not just entertainment but a reflection of resilience itself. And through Captain Jack Sparrow, through Edward Scissorhands, through all the unforgettable roles, people didn't just see an actor. They saw a man who had walked through fire and still managed to dance in the ashes, a man who knew what pain felt like but chose to bring laughter to others, a man who understood what it meant to be broken but still created beauty from the pieces. And that is why he became not just famous but beloved, because authenticity speaks louder than perfection, resilience shines brighter than ease, and truth resonates deeper than surface glamour. And Johnny Depp, through all his struggles, through every storm, kept living with a kind of truth that millions found hope in. And though his battles with depression were not once and done, though he would face more darkness later in life, the lesson was clear. Strength is not never falling, strength is rising every time you fall. Strength is refusing to let the worst chapters define the whole book, and his book is filled with proof that you can keep writing, keep changing, keep building a new story no matter how many times life tries to erase your pages, because Johnny Depp stands today not just as a Hollywood icon, but as a symbol for every dreamer, every struggler, every believer who has ever been told, "You can't," and yet chose to answer, "Watch me." And that is why his name carries weight, not just in cinema, but in the hearts of those who need to be reminded that giving up is never the answer, that depression can be fought, that failure can be flipped, and that no matter how many times you are pushed to your knees, you can rise again and claim the destiny that was meant for you all along. Johnny Depp's life teaches us that the path of true greatness is carved not in the absence of storms but in learning how to stand tall within them. And as he moved deeper into his career, the challenges he faced were not only professional but also deeply personal. For depression is not a battle you win once, it is a wave that returns, sometimes stronger, sometimes quieter, but always testing your spirit. And each time Johnny felt its weight, he chose again to fight, he chose again to continue. He chose again to believe that there was more to his story than sorrow, and that decision to keep walking forward is what turned his struggles into strength. Because while the world saw the glamour, the lights, the success, behind the curtain he was a man who had to confront doubt, heartbreak, financial instability, and the crushing expectations of fame. Yet even when his name was dragged through criticism, even when projects failed, even when life felt unfair, he transformed those moments into fuel. He poured them into his performances, into his characters, into the eyes of Jack Sparrow, into the silence of Edward Scissorhands, into the intensity of his many roles. And what people connected with was not just acting, it was his truth, his humanity, his ability to take pain and turn it into art. And this is why he never gave up, because he understood that his story wasn't only about himself, it was about every person who looked at him and saw hope, every person who felt broken but found healing in his roles, every person who saw that even someone as iconic as Johnny Depp carried scars but still moved forward. And when you realize that your life can inspire others, it gives you a reason to rise, a reason to endure, a reason to turn wounds into wisdom. And that is what Johnny did again and again. For when depression tried to pull him under, he answered with persistence. When the world tried to doubt him, he answered with creativity. When people tried to label him as finished, he answered with reinvention. And his journey reminds us that the world does not decide your worth, the struggles do not decide your worth, the opinions of others do not decide your worth, only you do. And Johnny's decision was simple. He would not quit, he would not let darkness win, he would not let failure define his story. Instead he would rise, he would fight, he would create. And in doing so he carved out not only a legendary career but also a legendary example of resilience. Proving that when you refuse to give up, when you refuse to let go of your dream, when you refuse to let depression silence you, you create a life that echoes beyond yourself, a life that inspires millions, a life that shows that victory is possible even for the most broken hearts. And that is the eternal power of Johnny Depp's journey.